Hello and welcome to the third video tutorial of the beginner Mern stack tutorial series. In the last video we had established connectivity between our Express application and MongoDB Atlas. In the current video we are going to define a schema and we are also going to define routes through which we will be able to perform the CRUD operations. Let's start by creating a file called schema.js in the root of our project. We'll be requiring mongoose, and we are going to use the schema and the model functionality within mongoose. So we'll say const schema is equal to mongoose.schema. Schema takes an object as a parameter, and this object defines the properties of the table that we are going to create in our MongoDB Atlas. So if we recall, then we had created a database called shop within which we had created a table called items. So shop and items. So our items table is going to contain 3 columns: name, quantity and rate respectively. We'll say name, which is a string, quantity, which is a number, and rate, which is also a number. Once this is done, we are going to create a model using schema. So we'll say const mod is equal to mongoose.model, and inside this we are going to specify the name of the model and the name of the schema as the 2 parameters. So we'll call the model as items and we'll name schema using this variable called schema. Once mod is created, we'll need to export it. So we'll say module.exports is equal to mod. Now this exported object will be used by the other files in order to perform operations on our database. We are done with the schema file. Now we'll go ahead and define the routes inside index.js. Before we go ahead and create the routes that will be responsible for the CRUD operations, we need to install 2 middlewares here. Extended as false. Now we need these 2 dependencies because the request body needs to be seen as a JSON object. Now we'll go and define the add route. We'll first need to import the schema model that we exported here. So just above the get route we are going to write require, say ./schema. So now this model will be used for all the operations that we need to do in association with the database. So we'll say app.post, because we are sending a payload onto our DB. So this will take two parameters again. First parameter, just like over here, will be add, so that it specifies the route. Second would be a request response callback function. So we'll say request response, and here we'll say const payload is equal to whatever comes from the request body. So we'll say request.body. Now we need to have a new instance using the model object over here. So we'll say const new is equal to new followed by model, and here we need to specify payload. So we are using our schema through model, and using the schema structure we are defining an instance using the new keyword here. And once we have created this new instance, we'll say new instance dot save. So this will be added onto our DB. Now this is a promise-based function, so it will return a .then and a .catch in case of success and failure, which will again take a callback function, or I mean you can call it an arrow function, which will give the relevant messages. So our route is ready. So when we try to post our payload, then our data should get added onto our MongoDB Atlas. But browsers are only capable of doing get operations, so we'll require a tool such as Postman, or we can use a plugin that is provided within VS Code itself. Let me show you how you can add that plugin. So you go to the plugins option and you say REST client. So REST client is already installed for me, and if you have a look, then there is a very simple way in which you can post data. So you say post followed by the URL you are sending it to, and then you say content type is application/JSON, and then you specify your payload or the JSON object. That's it. So let's create a file with the extension REST. So we'll go to the root of our application again and create a file called postman.rest. Okay, now here I'll say post because it's a HTTP post operation. I'll specify the URL. So my URL is correct. Now I'll say content type, and I'll say application/JSON, and then I'll specify what is the request body I'm going to post. So if we remember from our schema.js, we have three properties that we need to specify: name, quantity, and rate. So we are going to specify name, quantity, and rate here. Name, we'll say quantity, and we'll say rate, and we'll specify some numbers here, and since name is a string, so we'll specify item 1. So our post request seems to be appropriate. Now let's run the server and do a post operation. And before that, let's check if we have anything on the DB. So we do not have anything under items, so there are 0 records as of now. So we go back and run our application, and now let's post. Okay, so the part that we wrote for the success is being visible on the terminal. So it says data is and the data that we sent. Check. We'll go here and we'll say refresh. And there is one record. And maximize, then you can see it's the same record that we have posted. So post operation is working fine for us. Similarly, we can have other routes here as well. So we'll say app.get, and we want this to happen when someone hits the route show, and we'll need the request response callback functions. Request response, and when this happens, we want to have a look on our data. So we are using model.find, and since this is also a promise-based function, so we'll say .then and .catch. Actually, let me just copy this over. So yeah, let me say on the table is and plus data, and if there is an error, then just say console.log error. Save the file, and since we have added this particular code to our server file, we'll have to stop the server and run it over once again after we save, otherwise we'll not see the changes. So let me stop the server using Ctrl+C, and let me save it. Now I'll run it again. Okay, the Atlas is connected. Now let us have a get request. So if I want to have multiple requests in the same REST client file, so I'll say ###. This separates the two requests. So I'll say get and specify the URL. We want to hit this route. Say send. So in our terminal, we can see data on the table is, and it is showing us the data. So if we look at the code, so the show route is working. If we want to check, we can post another data and then see if we get both the data in our find route, or rather show route. You'll say item 2, and instead of 23 you say 43 and 27. So let's post this. Okay, so this was posted successfully. Let me send the get request now. So we can see there are 2 records now. So yeah, our routes are working, and we are able to post data and fetch data as well. Next tutorial, all we are going to do is we are going to send routes into a separate file called the routes file, so that it looks clean and understandable. So yeah, that's all for this video. See you in the next one.